You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
It's Wednesday night, time for the Paranormal Experience radio show with host Kat Hobson. Kick back, relax, and get ready to learn. Welcome to the show. Now, here's Kat.
Hello there. Welcome back to Paranormal Experience Radio. I am Kat Hobson, your host. And if you're joining me tonight, I am so excited to have Claire Broida with me. She is a friend. She is someone who is definitely a kindred spirit and soul. She is someone that I met at the Ozark Mountain UFO conference where we actually had just a wonderful time. She is someone who is a really fabulous friend, and that's weird because we've known each other a few months. Go figure. Jean is a freelance writer, and she's a researcher. She is a spiritual seeker, and she manages that by going through everything that she can find relevant to topics that interest her. That's how she became an author. And well, I kind of jumped the gun on that, but she is one of those people who is just brilliant. She's kind, she's lovely, she's very outspoken, probably the reason that we mesh so well. She is somebody who really just makes you glad to know her. And when I say that she covers everything, trying to find answers, she is a researcher in ufology, politics, that's a little dangerous lately. She is researcher of finance, technology, health issues, and I do have questions for her there. Can't wait for that. And she's a practiced mystic as well. She has advanced degrees in psychology, education, and computers. She is also the lead contributor to the dailyconspiracy.com, which, don't you know, that's fun, trying to do that research and get everything out. I think it would be. So, Jean, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for battling gremlins with me, and I am so looking forward to this.
Me too, Kat, and thank you so much for inviting me to be a guest on your show, which I love.
Thank you.
You're such a positive voice in a troubled world.
Oh, that's very flattering. Thank you. I try to be. You know, it is troubling. And sometimes downright scary.
I think you put yourself into the fear factor with some of your other shows. Your paranormal research with ghosts.
Oh, that doesn't scare me.
Taste for that stuff. Although I suppose the case could be made that UFOs are frightening.
I think they're more frightening. I think that's more frightening because, you know, there is no control there whatsoever, ever. And at least with the paranormal, I recognize situations and I have equipment. And I try to do things that can help people in their own homes, so I have a positive attitude and outlook going into that. And UFOs, ETs, you have no control whatsoever, not even the illusion of control.
My research agrees with that statement. Personally, I don't remember having seen a UFO. My research also indicates that not everyone remembers seeing UFOs.
Right.
But many people who've seen UFOs without a clear memory experience other physiological or psychological side effects, and I may fall into that category of people. There is some reason why many people are interested in the topic of UFOs who do not claim to have had a direct experience.
Yes.
If you have seen a UFO or seen an occupant of a UFO or been inside a craft, naturally you have a firm conviction that this is a true thing. This happened to me. No matter if a psychiatrist says it was a delusion, a hallucination, if you lived it, if you were pinching your own arms as you lived through it, or had every reason to believe you were in a full waking state of consciousness, or even a partial state of consciousness, if you have memories, maybe memories that came out through hypnosis, who is anybody else to say it didn't happen or it wasn't real for you? But imagine you're that person confronted with a UFO for the first time, and let's just say you're Barney Hill, who in 1961 looked through binoculars at a roadside stop in the middle of the night in, I want to say New Hampshire, looked through binoculars because he and his wife had been tracking a strange light in the sky that didn't move like a conventional aircraft and followed them for miles. It should have passed them if it had been a conventional aircraft, but it didn't. It hung around. And he looks through binoculars and he sees beings on a craft looking back at him. At that point, his head is filled with a buzzing sound and he goes into some sort of mind control, and hypnotic suggestion is being fed to him. Don't move, just keep looking, everything's fine. And in his hypnotic recollection, he was terrified. And when he was conscious after hypnosis, he said, I realized, even in that state of mind, that the way I was being addressed by this alien entity was very much like I would talk to rabbits I was hunting. He's getting close to a rabbit. Come on now, little fella, not gonna hurt you. And then pow! In the bag. And that's what Barney Hill experienced. He could never shake that memory. And he died 8 years after that observation and his encounter, which was quite complex and well documented, and is one of the chapters of my new book. He never shook that experience, and he died of a brain aneurysm 8 years after it happened. We'll never know if it was causal or merely correlative. In other words, did his experience cause his brain aneurysm or not, basically?
Right.
Or was it coincidental? He never recovered his sense of security. He went to a psychiatrist. He was the one who really sought out the hypnosis to figure out what was bothering them. They knew something had happened and they didn't know what. Well, imagine you're one of these experiencers who has been face to face with UFOs. The abduction is classic because it involved a couple, a married couple. His reaction, and he, by the way, had been active in World War II. He was a veteran of World War II. He had seen combat. He'd lost his teeth in a grenade blast. It had knocked his teeth out.
Oh, my.
Oh, yes. So this man knew military aircraft. He knew armaments, guns. He knew warfare, tactics, strategy. He may not have known strategy, but certainly he knew tactics as an infantryman. And when he saw that UFO and he saw people staring back, his instinct was, if not his instinct, his reaction was to grab his gun. That was his first reaction. Betty's first reaction on seeing a light of interest in the sky was to roll down her window as the car was driving along, lean out and go, yoo-hoo, we're over here, come on in, hi. Well, when the aliens had a confrontation with these folks, Barney went into a state of shock, and he allowed himself to be mind controlled. He didn't want to arouse himself out of what we might think of as an induced hypnotic state, where he was listening to their suggestion, to keep his eyes closed. Not there. There was one alien that was communicating with them, the leader, so-called. Listening to his suggestion, and I say his, we don't know their gender. I'm using his as a linguistic convenience, okay? The leader, he gives him the suggestion, keep your eyes closed, you'll be all right, just don't look. And that's what Barney did. He kept his eyes closed, and he didn't look. Betty, on the other hand, immediately shook herself out of this enforced, suggestible state of mind and roused herself to 100% consciousness outside the car when they were abducted and before they got to the craft, to the point where when they were at the craft ramp going up, she said all of a sudden she had a change of heart. She'd been eager to go, and all of a sudden she was overcome with dread. She said, I don't want to go in there. I'm not going. And they said, yeah, it'll be fine. We're just going to take a few tests. She said, no, I don't want to go. And they started to force her, and she fought with them. She struggled, and it ripped her dress. And they went on board. They got her on board. They assured her it would be all right, got her on board, and they ran tests. It became what we now know as the classic UFO abduction, except no anal probes, interestingly, or none that were mentioned.
You know,
how would it feel to be that person who stares face to face with aliens and you can't talk about it to anybody? It would be awful.
It would be awful. But something interesting also is that when they were returned, Betty actually brought back a star chart. And despite all the fear, all the angst, all the things that happened to them, you know, people thought she was crazy. They thought they both were. But that star chart in recent times has been found to be accurate. So she brought back proof, but nobody knew it at the time.
The star chart is debatable. I know Stanton Friedman was amongst the first researchers to look into the star map. So what happened, the backstory for people not familiar with the case is, in brief, Betty and Barney Hill were accosted by aliens after Betty called them over.
So, hey, come on in. I can't believe that. I think that is just astounding.
Which right there makes a great story.
It does.
Stop right there. But wait, there's more. The aliens take them out of their car, have tried to put them into a trance state. Barney stays in the trance state. Betty shakes herself out, but she's not aggressive until she gets to the ramp, and then they convince her to calm down. They go into the ship. Betty is the observer at this point. Barney is marginally aware of what's going on because his eyes are closed throughout this whole episode on board the craft. And the craft, by the way, has landed. It's on the ground. They go up and in. They put each of Betty and Barney in separate rooms off of a long corridor that seems to wrap around the perimeter of this oval-shaped, or I should say pancake-shaped craft, described as a flying pancake. So Betty is being examined, and they do eye, ears, nose, throat, take skin scrapings. They insert a needle into her navel as a pregnancy test. When it turns out to be excruciatingly painful, the leader comes over, waves a hand over her face or her eyes, and no longer does she feel any pain. They finish their examination with her. The examiner goes off into the other room to do Barney, and the leader hangs back and talks to Betty. And the first thing she asks the leader is, "Where are you from?" She says, and by the way, this information comes from an interview that Betty gave 30-some years after the event, and by then she'd softened up quite a bit. In her hypnosis tapes, she is terrified. But when she talks about her experience 35 years later, she's completely at ease and joking, very jocular about the whole thing. Oh, it was a lark in the woods. Well, we know it wasn't from the hypnosis tapes, but she put a positive spin on it later in her life, which is very admirable. But be that as it may, she's talking to the leader, and she says, basically, "I know that you're not from around here."